Hello, everyone out there in cyberspace. Good evening and welcome to tonight's second episode of my three-part series, A Bold Vision for Portland. I am your host and your candidate for Mayor of Portland, Oregon, Ozzie Gonzalez, here to share my vision for transportation and mobility with you. Over the next hour, I will describe my key policies and speak with two guests about their work in the transportation and mobility sector. For everybody tuning in, we will be answering questions at the end of the program, so send in your questions through the comments section of the live stream, and we will answer as many as we can get to in this hour. Tonight's program is coming to you live via YouTube and Facebook from the studio at North Rim, right here in good old Southeast Portland. I am here with the studio director, Mike DiNapoli, sitting just way over there at the other end of the studio. How you doing over there, Mike?
I'm great, thanks.
Very good, very good. So, my guests today are going to be joining us via video conference once again from the safety of their own home. They are standing by and will be joining us just in a little while. Portland, you have changed. I remember when you used to be an easy place to get around in. Everything was 10 minutes away, the streets were quieter, safer, kinder. And we had a better balance between the spaces for cars, bikes, buses, and pedestrians. You remember? Boy, how things have changed, right? With the congestion, the frustration, and the carbon emissions only worsening in our city, it's time for a leader who can get us ahead of this downward trend and bring forward a clear vision for the future of mobility in Portland, one that we can all get around. And that's why tonight, I'd like to share my vision for transportation and mobility with you. Last year was the deadliest year for cyclists and pedestrians in Portland's history. 49 people died in Portland traffic deaths in 2019, the most since 1997. Since 2008, Portland has seen a steady increase of traffic fatalities. And this jump in 2019 took us further away from Vision Zero. That's our city's goal to eliminate all traffic fatalities by 2025. Commute times have also increased over the last few years, making the likelihood of traffic incidents so much higher. Although the city of Portland is still lower than the national average on commute times, the average commute in Portland has increased by more than 60% in the. But I'm sure that a lot of you out there watching tonight already know that. A recent study has shown that Portland is becoming a hub for super commuters. These are the people who spend more than 90 minutes each way getting to work. There's some people listening tonight that might fit in that category. And this is true across all mobility platforms. And it is not only affecting the safety of our roads, it's increasing our carbon footprint and eroding our quality of life in the process. This quarantine has reminded us all of just how precious time at home with our families can really be. We should not forget this when we return to a fully functioning city once again. What we do about these problems over the next few years will have a major impact on how much things cost to incorporate, as well as how beneficial they are going to be to our community. We already know this issue is important on many fronts, and we already know that regardless of how we get around, we all depend on our leaders to come up with clear and safe solutions. Lately, the changes that have rolled out in roadways and bike paths across our city, while well-intended, have brought new design conditions, new road situations for people to get accustomed to. For people that are new to our city or that are here just visiting for the day, these unique road conditions can be very disorienting. All of this creates safety hazards for pedestrians and bicyclists trying to get around. We need to have a comprehensive approach that people understand so that all of these incremental changes that we're making don't surprise people and create confusion. Today, I'm going to tell you about my plan to address all of these pressing issues. Now, as you might have heard in episode 1, solution begins with a clear vision for what the end point will be. I call that my North Star. The way I see it, Portland here is our North Star for mobility. Portland will be a city where people and goods are moving around efficiently, conveniently, affordably, safely, and equitably, using locally produced vehicles running on locally produced renewable fuels. That's it. Plain and simple. We know that the vehicle technology is going to change. We also know that gravity will stay the same. This means we will always have a need for roadways, but the infrastructure of those roadways is going to have to adapt to new technologies. There's no reason on earth for Portland to rest on its laurels and wait for electric vehicle manufacturers from other states and other countries to bring the technologies we need here. We don't need those saviors from outside. And there is no reason on earth to wait for outside investors to come to our state and to create a local renewable fuels industry. We have all of the ingredients that we need right here in Oregon to supply 100% of our energy needs from renewable sources. All we need to do is invest in the infrastructure to harness them. But beyond changing how we move and the fuels we use, as your mayor, I'm going to also address why we move. In episode 1, I spoke a little bit about my transit-oriented development overlay zone. Tonight, I'm going to expand on that idea a little bit more. The objective behind all of my policies are to create walkable neighborhoods throughout the city so that residents don't need to travel long distances to meet their daily needs. This will reduce our transportation carbon footprint more than any right-of-way improvement project that we can dream up. Now, here's the fun part, Portland. How are we going to get there? For those of you that know me, you probably already know the answer. The way we're going to get there is together. The government provides the policies and a clear set of standards. Neighborhoods provide the insight and help us set our top priorities one neighborhood at a time. And local businesses provide the investment, the drive, and the commitment to innovate. Together we can pull this off. The transitions we need to make are not small, Portland. They will require a fierce fixation on constant improvement and a government that challenges us all to lean into this through partnerships. Creating the pipelines for workers and creating new industries is not going to be easy. But I am certain that we can do it if we work together and come together as one city with a shared vision. Now, there are 4 policy initiatives that I'm proposing under my plan for transportation and mobility. These are 1. Establishing a transit-oriented development overlay zone. 2. Establishing a citywide Safe Streets initiative. 3. Updating vehicle standards and funding models to reduce congestion. And 4, mandating employers to provide commuter programs for employees. And what are these, you might ask? Well, let's take a look at them one at a time, shall we? Beginning with transit-oriented development overlay zones. Now, in the last episode, I mentioned a little bit about how transit-oriented development overlay zones are a land use policy that helps incentivize developments throughout the city of Portland that are going to enhance public transit. This zone is going to be designated to cover all transit corridors throughout the city, and I'm proposing we go half a mile to either side of all transit corridors so that this zone can apply. And if you own land within any of those areas along transit corridors, this policy will incentivize you to develop it in a way that enhances public transit. What do I mean by that? Well, our guests today are going to be talking a little bit more about what they see in the kind of work that they do, but the long and short of it is that we could have incentives to create places to plug in vehicles, places to rent short mobility solutions like e-scooters and bicycles. We could have mobility hubs that include those easy, quick turnaround services that we need to do over the course of a day, like pick up some batteries or check mail or go and pick up some chapstick at a convenience store, an Amazon locker package delivery. All of these things are reasons that we move around. Well, my transit-oriented development policy is going to ensure that when we develop and densify our neighborhoods, we're bringing a diverse housing portfolio, we're bringing mobility amenities, and we are bringing services to the neighborhood that make the entire neighborhood more walkable. And that's what I mean by changing why we travel. You know, one of the things we talk about a lot in the transportation world is induced demand. And one of the ways that we can induce demand is by accommodating more vehicles, like making bigger parking lots or creating wider freeways. That does not do anything to motivate people to get out of their cars and move around in different ways. But for all the work we do right now to try to eliminate parking or eliminate lanes or not expand lanes on freeways, one of the most important things we can do that influences the induced demand of vehicle travel is take houses and jobs and bring them closer together. The transit-oriented development policy does exactly that. That's just a little broad brush about the transit-oriented development overlay zone. It creates opportunities for us to work with the development community on funding packages, financing systems, partnerships, so that we could have waiting areas and bus stops within the public space of a development. These are all the kind of things that are made possible once we start to partner. The next idea is a Safe Streets initiative. It breaks my heart to think that we have neighborhoods where the kids playing outside are at risk because there might be blind intersections, or there might be overgrown corners or covered up street signs where you can't see the stop sign or the speed limit sign. We have a lot of narrow neighborhood roads in our city and a lot of young families that depend on that outside space for their kids to have somewhere to go play. It's a fantastic city for a child to grow up in, and we don't want to cut a child's life short because we have unsafe road conditions. So my Safe Streets initiative is going to prioritize safety throughout neighborhoods. But how are we going to get there quickly? There's no better set of eyes than the neighborhoods themselves. So the way I see it, the Safe Streets initiative is going to have opportunities for people from the neighborhoods, like neighborhood association groups, community groups, churches, people that have a vested interest in that neighborhood to be able to find out or point out where the safety issues are. Nobody knows those neighborhoods better than the neighborhood themselves, and so I believe the government can partner with those neighborhoods to find out where the unsafe situations are. And that's not all. The government needs to lean into helping solve those issues. So how we fund those solutions, how we are able to resolve those issues quickly is the kind of leadership that I will bring as your mayor. So I want to make sure that we start a Safe Streets initiative that goes citywide, where the neighborhood gets to identify those project priorities and the city gets to support finding funding sources, whether it's public or private, as well as assisting in the permitting process. Because there's a lot of neighborhoods out there that have unsafe conditions but don't have the time or the expertise to go through the permitting. And I think we can solve those issues. The next piece of Safe Streets are looking at transit corridors. By specializing transit corridors so that we have some roads that are for non-motorized travel and some roads that are for only motorized travel, we have an opportunity to actually segregate uses and create much better corridors. You might have seen there's a few roads along Southeast where the bicyclists are able to use that as a thoroughfare safely and comfortably, and the cars do not enter those. Those are some of the examples we can draw from to find out where else in the city we might have opportunities to do this. We're moving towards a multimodal world, and every time those modalities intersect, those are where the risks and the vulnerabilities are to people that are traveling. So we've got to address that. Now, moving on to the next idea, I'd like to talk a little bit about the reducing congestion. This is a pretty big idea, and around it, it's not just taking less cars on the roads, but it's really looking at the kinds of cars, the kinds of vehicles that are on the road, as well as how we work to incentivize people to shift things off peak hours if they can. So let me talk a little bit about reducing congestion. We have a system in the United States for vehicle safety standards that is established by the Federal Highway Administration. And there are safety standards established that are designed for automobiles that are traveling on freeways. Now, if you're traveling on a freeway where there's no traffic, you could very easily be going 50 to 60 miles an hour, maybe even more. But most of the time, those automobiles that you purchase that are designed to be able to withstand something that occurs at 50 to 60 miles an hour and gets you out alive safely are not conditions that you're in all the time. You're more often driving 15 to 25, maybe 30 miles an hour through town, and you very rarely get up to those speeds in any city road. In fact, you should never. So what I'd like to do is acknowledge that 90% of the uses we have for automobile travel or for vehicle travel, let's just call it that, throughout the city is not for those freeways that would require those high-end standards for those vehicles. There's very few cities in the United States that have city vehicle standards. I think it's high time Portland added themselves to that list. There's a lot of opportunities to create vehicle standards for city street use only that helps create a different standard for safety and design so that we have other vehicle options. And this is where there's an opportunity for Portlanders and Portland industries to start getting involved. I feel that we could have, once we have vehicle standards for city street use only, we could have R&D funding for local fuel producers and local vehicle manufacturers. And I'm talking about the whole gamut between the unicycle and the bicycle, all up the spectrum to human-assisted electric vehicles, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, up to human-assist four-wheel vehicles. We have opportunities to do all of that stuff. I've seen the makers of our city come up with amazing contraptions that they move around in our city with. I think we can do something that can actually help address the transportation carbon footprint. Now, the final idea before we move to our guests is employee commuter programs. Now, you hear throughout my policy agenda that I have some ideas for what we can do through incentives by motivating and accelerating investment. Most of the things that I do are using the carrot more than the stick. But in this policy, I took a different approach. I actually said, here's where I would like to place a requirement on businesses. Now, I'm a business owner myself, and I help a lot of businesses in our community. So I'm very careful when I start putting requirements and mandates onto businesses. And my philosophy is always, for every requirement we put into place, we want to provide an equal serving of support and guidance. Because what we want at the end of the day through all of these mandates is for businesses to step forward and not just meet the standard, but challenge the standard, exceed the standard, because that's how we get better. And so I believe there's a huge opportunity in employee commuter programs throughout the city. Some companies already do this. And for those Portlanders out there that have a boss that already has commuter incentives, good for you. You're working with a company that's thinking about the mobility footprint of their workforce. But not everybody out there is doing it. So I think we could learn a lot by setting that standard for all businesses that operate within the city of Portland, to have commuter programs where they are having conversations with their staff about how they travel to work. This allows them to figure out how to offset commute times to off-peak hours, perhaps. We've all learned how telecommuting is something that we can possibly do with parts of our job. Those kind of programs can help offset the hours you need to be or the days you need to be in the office. There's also other programs like incentives for transit passes or special perks or special reductions on health insurance premiums for folks that bicycle to work. The world has infinite possibilities for how to motivate our Portlanders to get to work at times that offset congestion and that reduce our carbon footprint. I believe this is one of those opportunities to put a mandate down that challenges our employers and our businesses to have these conversations. I think this will be time very well spent and we will all learn better for it. So with the combination of all of these ideas, I believe that we have an opportunity to address our transportation carbon footprint directly. We can put the matter of how fast we get to zero carbon transportation in our own hands, Portland. I also think that we have an opportunity to bring that creativity and that can-do DIY spirit out so that we start to see some different types of mobility solutions that can move people or goods across and throughout the city with human-powered and human-assist mobility solutions. This is within our reach, and I want to bring, as your mayor, the kind of leadership that sets the challenge down and provides a support system and a partnership system around you so that we can get there as fast as possible. Now, I'm going to take a little break here before I introduce our guests. I can see from the other screen that they're already logged in. They've been very patiently waiting. So without further ado, I'd like to bring them in, but give me a sec. Okay. Now, I'd like to introduce my guests. First up is Adrian Pearmine, the National Director for Smart Cities and Connected Vehicles for DKS Associates right here in Portland. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering with a focus on transportation from the University of Washington. And for over 23 years, he has specialized in the planning, design, and implementation of intelligent transportation systems and telecommunications networks. A lot of big words he'll explain in a sec. For the last several years, he has been combining his background in transportation technology and his telecom experience to help deliver smarter solutions to the mobility challenges that our cities and our citizens face. Joining Adrian and myself tonight is Gary Exner, president of the Oregon Electric Vehicle Association, a nonprofit here in the state of Oregon dedicated to promoting and educating the public about electric vehicles. Gary is a passionate advocate for EVs, and he has been organizing public events to promote the use of electric vehicles since 2014. He's in his second year as the president of OEVA, and I'm going to throw on my headset so that I can hear them. So without further ado, let me welcome both Gary and Adrian. Welcome, gentlemen, to tonight's show.
Thank you. Good evening, Ozzie.
Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you okay. Can you hear me okay?
I see. Thank you. I see your mouth moving. So I'm going to go ahead. Now we're live. I don't hear you yet on my headset. So do you hear me? Can you just give me a nod if you hear me? Oh, good. I see two nods. And I'm guessing the audience can probably hear me and you. So it's just me. I'm going to go ahead and not mess with buttons. And I'm going to try this again. Let's see if our studio can bring up some sound. Can you guys both say hello to myself and the audience, Adrian and Gary?
Good evening, Ozzie.
Good evening. This is Gary.
Very good. And you could turn it down. I just need to hear him just a smidge. Very good, gentlemen. I could hear you over here. I'm going to go ahead and take these off. I don't think the sound's going through these, so I don't get to play DJ for the evening. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's see. You guys both are doing some pretty interesting work, coming at this from very different worlds. So let's go one at a time. And I'd like to hear if you could just share what is it that brought you into EVs and what are you working on currently in the EV world? And I'd like to begin, let's see here. I'd like to begin with you, Adrian.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll start off a little bit more broadly than just EVs and let Gary kind of do more of the deep dive into the electric vehicle world. My space with DKS Associates, for those that aren't familiar with our company, we are a traffic engineering and transportation planning firm with our headquarters based here in Oregon, but doing this kind of work up and down the West Coast. But as our national director for smart cities and connected vehicles, I get to work in the electric vehicle space, but also the emerging areas of transportation. And you were alluding to all kinds of new modes, whether it's the scooters that we have already seen on our roadways, whether it's e-bikes that we're going to be seeing a lot more of in our roadways soon, all kinds of new form factors that you were talking about. We're very excited about all kinds of new first and last mile mobility solutions to connect our businesses and our residences to TriMet and our regional public transit opportunities. So I'm engaged in all of those different areas and do a lot of work with City of Portland, do a lot of work with TriMet, with Metro, and just very excited to hear you talking about all these topics and the ideas of reclaiming bigger sections of our streets for all kinds of mobility choices other than just the single occupant vehicle. So I'll let Gary maybe pick it up from there and talk a bit more specifically about the electric vehicle side of things.
Thanks,
Sure,
Adrian.
thanks, Adrian. The Oregon Electric Vehicle Association has been around for about 25 years promoting the adoption of electric vehicles. We primarily do this through interfacing with the public and talking from our own experience base. 25 years ago, there weren't a lot of choices on the marketplace for people that wanted to drive electric, but that's changed radically now. And to where we can, show people dozens of different vehicles that might fit their needs, everything from a small commuter car to a longer distance. And, and that ties in well with certainly reducing the carbon footprint, as Ozzie was talking about. And, that's a real option today. And so that's kind of what the OEVA is about. And so we interface with the public at places like the Portland Auto Show and for National Drive Electric Week. And this year we didn't get to, but Drive Electric Earth Day is another time where we get to get out there and talk about electric vehicles. So there were some virtual events, but it's not the same as experiencing driving an EV. So that's kind of what we do.
That was how I ran into you originally, Gary, was the Drive Electric Earth Day announcement that went digital. So thank you. So let's talk a little bit about this multimodal world first, because whether we're talking about an electric vehicle, a scooter, a two-wheel, three-wheel, four-wheel, or any amount of wheels, they each have this common platform need of getting recharged. We don't seem to see the same sort of interface for vehicles, for cars right now that we're seeing with e-scooters, at least out in charging stations. I know that the scooters, like the Limes and the Spins and those sorts of scooter paratransit vendors, have folks that are in the gig economy that go pick them up and go charge them in places, which kind of creates its own mobility footprint. How, from your experience, how's the charging setup? How are the infrastructure needs of charging able to play with all these different mobility platforms? Or are we still in the world where everybody has their own sort of, pre-USB, everyone has their own sort of connection platform? And I'll throw this, let's see here. How do you see it, Gary, changing just in cars specifically, and then we'll broaden it with you, Adrian?
Yeah, it's a little different. Cars are actually pretty easy, as they can charge from virtually any power source, whether that's your 120 volt outlet that you'd plug your computer into, or it can be an electric, charging station that has 240 volt or even higher power for long distance travel. And so it's just the car can accept basically whatever power that you can plug into. And for many people, just plugging into a standard outlet overnight will get them 30 or 40 miles, which is plenty for a commute. So most charging is done currently at home, something like 80 to 90%. But that has a kind of an assumption that people have someplace to park off street and will have power to their parking spot. And that's not always the case. It's something like in some areas, 50% or better of the population doesn't have that available. And that's where we see a greater barrier going forward. And that's where we see the need for, workplace charging, multifamily housing, and some other things. Public charging has its place, but for most people, it's a little inconvenient to charge at the shopping mall. It's much more convenient to be able to charge at home or at work.
Adrian, how are you seeing building codes or infrastructure for charging being driven in other cities? I know that you work with many cities and you worked at the national level. So are you seeing those things moving rapidly in some areas? What are you seeing locally?
Yeah, in some areas it's rapid, and I know that the state is working on some guidelines. And one of the things I talk to people about is a good example is many years ago when microwaves were first coming in is homes just weren't wired to take them. So somebody that wanted to use a microwave oven in their kitchen had to get an electrician out and retrofit a pretty heavy duty at that time circuit for it. And electrical codes changed to recognize that. So all new homes and new construction remodels, now a kitchen has to have a dedicated circuit for a microwave. And I see the same thing for that type of housing. For single family residents, it certainly should, and it's easy to do, to dedicate a 240 volt outlet in the garage to charge vehicles. It's a little more problematic when you come to multifamily, but there's certainly measures and ways to do that. And the same with workplace charging. There's some, pretty heavy studies done primarily out of California that tends to lead the adoption on these. Some of the cities have adopted minimum parking spaces that are EV charging ready, that has the equipment, and a greater number that can be installed later with the conduit or the wiring in place. And I think that's something that definitely needs to start happening now, because it opens up the opportunity for people to take advantage of the benefits of an EV to a greater audience.
We'll get back to the cost factor in a sec. Let's stay on the policy for a second. Adrian, what are you seeing at the national level or another in your world?
Yeah, well, as Gary was saying, California is got a bit of a leadership position in a lot of the electrification here. And you mentioned earlier the difference between carrots and sticks, and your thoughts on how to bring that into policy here. California has mandated pretty strict air quality mandates across the state that cities are needing to meet to stay compliant. And they realized a while ago that vehicle electrification was one of the biggest areas for them to be able to move the needle on air quality. So to meet the state mandates there, they've been pushing a lot more for fleet electrification with their own fleets, as well as better policy to encourage the build out of charging infrastructure to support the citizens. And so I think we have a lot of models that we can look at there. Sacramento made a choice a while ago to really want to be one of the leaders in vehicle electrification. I think there's some good policy that we can look to down there, and it'd be great to get Portland back into a real leadership position on vehicle electrification and air quality in general. I want to talk for a second too, Ozzie, you're mentioning electrification of some of the other modes and where we are there. You've also mentioned a couple times mobility hubs. And so for those that aren't as familiar with this concept, the idea of having a location usually fairly well located with transit access to then be able to get off of light rail or off of a bus and have multiple options to do your first and last mile connection from that transit connection to your place of business, to the store you're trying to go to, or back home. And having a scooter, having an e-bike, having a EV that you can borrow, rent for an hour or two. The mobility hub concept is bringing all of those modes together into a single location like that. We haven't really been able to get there yet, or maybe we haven't made the bold moves to get there yet here locally. And part of it, especially with some of the new modes, with scooters in particular, we're still very much in the pilot and demonstration phase right now. But as the dust starts to settle on some of those new modes and we're really comfortable rolling them out, we are going to have to make some pretty bold and aggressive decisions about investment. The charging of scooters and charging of e-bikes and some of these other ones, as Gary was also saying with cars, are largely relatively easy from a standard standpoint. And so it's the design, building, and planning of those mobility hubs to really be flexible and allow us to change the number of different types of modes to be able to shrink and grow as gracefully as possible. That's the kind of planning that we're going to need to do in the next phase to really be able to bring this electrification across all modes.
And going back to the cost parameter, Gary, you have that fantastic story. It's very vivid in my mind about the microwaves, because as a kid, I used to help my dad remodel homes. And we got to do a lot of those, that people bought a microwave and all of a sudden they needed a dedicated circuit. So I understand that there's the easy way to pre-wire and pre-position. We've even had some homes that will do that for solar power production. They'll pre-wire and get it ready. In a similar fashion, getting that infrastructure designed in and getting the conduits, getting the wires ready to go in a plug and play does add a little bit of a cost up front, but it also saves a lot of cost when you're coming in to do a retrofit for something that time is going to make it happen, is going to make it necessary anyway. When we're talking about these incremental costs for future infrastructure, that's a cost we must incur today. Do either of you have examples of where we might see a good instance of how that sort of shared cost, the shared investment when we're innovating, where there's something that has actually struck a successful sort of land on how to partner on these things?
I can't think of a direct partnership that comes to mind with that, but certainly the benefits are there long term for an initial investment. Is the low hanging fruit is the single family home. Certainly, that should be implemented immediately. There's no reason not to. It's simply putting a 240 volt outlet into the garage, and the incremental cost for that to the builder is well under $100. And so that's relatively minor in when you're talking about today's home prices, and so like I said, that's the low hanging fruit, and certainly that should be implemented immediately.
Well, let me take a quick pause and say this to the audience then. You've heard it here, that this is some of the low hanging fruit that when we bring folks forward that are on the front lines of these kinds of transitions, these are the no-brainers, that with a stroke of a pen, we could do a lot to accelerate change. And as mayor, this is the kind of input that I bring to the table and take very seriously when we're trying to figure out what are the buttons and levers that we shift so that change can be made more rapidly. So going back to you guys, let's talk about the future a little bit. What's on the horizon as far as technology? Because we're sitting here talking about the low-hanging fruit for something that is already off the shelf, ready to buy. But what's down the pipeline that we haven't seen arrive on the shelf that we might want to think about for infrastructure policy? And since you've been talking about all the tech stuff, I'm going to start with you, Adrian, and we'll see where we pick up from there, Gary.
Okay, well, there's a lot of hype and excitement around the self-driving cars, around autonomous vehicles. And I think there was a lot of early misinformation and a lot of, I'm not quite sure the right way to say this, but a lot of folks were thinking that the game plan here was just to replicate the single occupant vehicle with a self-driving car.
Right.
I think the real strategy in this space is to encourage self-driving mobility shuttles that can carry multiple people. And you were talking about different modes that are set aside for city streets that wouldn't necessarily be going on the freeways. I'm a big believer in this future of little 10 and 12 and 15 person slow moving light electric shuttles that are driving around our neighborhoods and picking people up and bringing them out to connect to light rail and to connect to high capacity bus transit corridors. And to me, the policy on the city side to really encourage that sort of utopian version of the autonomous vehicle, as opposed to just a bunch of individual single occupant vehicles that sometimes are single occupant driving around and sometimes are no occupant driving around. That's kind of the nightmare version of the autonomous vehicle. So there's a lot of work to be done on the policy side to really achieve the outcomes and the goals that we want to achieve as a city when it comes to that. So that's certainly one area. Then e-bikes, we're going to see this much more rapidly. This is pretty much off the shelf, and we're going to see that in both our shared bike fleet and in a lot of individual bikes. I'll let Gary pick up here, and I'll try to think about some other new emerging things that I can think of.
Yeah, certainly there's a lot more choices coming out there on the vehicle market, but one of the things that's exciting to us is seeing the flourishing of the used vehicle market that brings it a lot more affordable to a broader population base. Is, you know, one of the detriments of EVs over the years has certainly been their initial buy-in cost. You know, the technology is new, it's more expensive, kind of like the flat screens when they first came out is
Right.
only you know, that was a high ticket item. But we're seeing, you know, a huge number now that are available on the used market. There's some dealers that are specializing that in entirely. And Oregon has their Charge Ahead program that specifically incentivizes, you know, low to moderate income people to get some additional help in purchasing an EV. And so we're seeing that, and, you know, that's kind of going back to the carbon footprint. And, you know, we see that, you know, it's single family or single occupant vehicles are going to be a part of our society. And there's certainly an opportunity for both models. I know Las Vegas, I believe, and Los Angeles both have some autonomous shuttles like Adrian was talking about that are 12, 15 passengers that are driverless and electric and shuttling people around. Mm-hmm. Typically, you know, that's more ideal for something like at airport parking to the parking lots and stuff at this point, but that's certainly going to expand to be able to handle city streets pretty quickly. But there's also, you know, the benefits of the vehicle that is, you know, the autonomous vehicle division that a lot of people see is the single vehicle that's going to pick somebody up, take them to the bus station, or take them downtown. Then it doesn't have to park. It can then find the next rider and take them to wherever they need to go. And so you're not having all this parking lot. And the pollution levels are incredibly low with an EV. You know, with the coronavirus, I don't know how many people have looked at coronavirus pollution maps around the world. If you get a chance to Google that, it's pretty striking. I know Oregon says 90% of the particulate matter comes from vehicle emissions. You know, that we have, and so that's a real goal that we can go. We've seen the clean air that we can get with this, and you know, electric vehicles as, you know, whether commuter vehicles, whether as the you know, the rideshare, Uber, Lyft type things, whether it's the Uber Eats, the delivery, and all these kinds of things can certainly take a big burden off the pollution levels in the city. There's some places around the world that have you know, pollution-free zones. If you're going to drive downtown London, is you've got to have a vehicle that drives on electric or a special permit. And so you see some of these plug-in hybrids that sales have greatly increased in those areas, because that's the only way people can drive downtown. The pollution levels have gotten so bad, and EVs are an immediate solution for that.
And Oregon's Commission on Carbon Emissions on climate has actually, their latest report, which was published in 2018, does cite that 60% of the gap between our carbon emissions currently and our goal is represented in the emissions of vehicle fuels. So it's right there. They say about we could get 60% closer to our goal if we were to address vehicle fuels directly. And I think that just shows the opportunity factor here when we talk about really what our collective transportation footprint is. I want to talk not so futuristic for a second, because Gary, when I had a conversation with you in prep for all this, you clued me into a world that I don't see enough of right now. And in a recovery mode, when a lot of people are having to literally scrimp and save and check the cushions and be as resourceful as maybe they've ever had to be, there's conversions out there that I've heard about. And I know that over the years, the ability to convert vehicles has continued to get, evolve and get developed. What do you know about converting? For the public out there, can any kind of car get converted to electric? Is it an expensive thing? Are there people that do it? What would you say to folks that might be thinking, gosh, I wish I could go electric, but I can't afford one of those new things, and I can't wait for the used one?
We get that question quite a lot at these shows, and it's going to be, the answer right now is it's more expensive to do a conversion than it is to buy a production vehicle. and you're going to get a vehicle of, I won't say lesser quality, but different quality. It won't be its fit and finish. It won't have necessarily the heating and the regenerative braking and stuff. It is much easier done on a production vehicle. Some of our members, or a good percentage of them, started one. If you wanted an electric vehicle, you indeed had to convert one. One of them has, as a daily driver, a Porsche 911 Targa that he converted, and he loves the car. It's got, it was a daily driver for a long time for him, and he got about 100 miles out of it. But 100 miles per charge in range, I should say. But, he says today, never do it again. It's just going to be, if you have an old vehicle that you love, it can be converted, but it's going to be a fairly pricey proposition.
Gotcha.
One thing I will say though on that, Ozzie, there's a few companies out there that will do this, and there are some absolutely gorgeous classic cars that have been converted into fully electric. And if anyone on this is listening that is a car collector and is worried about that, some of these same companies will take the original equipment, the engine, and store it for you, so that you can convert back if you wanted to have the resale value of your classic car. But there are some beautiful ones. But I think those are pretty, one-off cases with people that are just really passionate about that car. I think the opportunity for us on a much bigger scale to move the needle much more in the air quality world with conversion is buses. And it is possible to actually convert an entire bus from diesel to electric, or from other fuel sources to electric. And so I think there's a lot of potential for us to be looking at that as a potentially even more cost-effective way than buying an all-new bus electric fleet.
Adrian, are you familiar with the conversion project that TriMet is undergoing currently?
Yeah, and that is one of the one example is the agency. They have both a small mini fleet of purpose-built, fully electric vehicles, but they're also going to be doing some conversions to electric to find out how well that works for the agency.
Gary, were you familiar with this conversion project?
Not the TriMet one, but I know that there's several other around, and I know some of the people that are working on them. And so, a lot of it's custom and one-off. And there's certainly some incentive to do so, as I know that there's some, from the VW Dieselgate, the settlement on that is there's some incentive to get rid of some of the dirty diesel. And one of the options transit agencies have through that program is converting diesel to electric.
That's right. Yeah, I'm thrilled. The techie in me is really excited to see how that conversion of the bus comes out. I've heard good updates. The general manager was telling my colleagues and myself, as I sit on the TriMet board. Full disclosure, for those that did not know, I sit on the TriMet board. And so I've had the opportunity to see how that project has moved along. I'm frankly curious. I'm very skeptical and cautiously optimistic, I would say, about what's going to happen once we hit the road with that converted vehicle. But there's only one way to learn, I would say. And at this point, at least, between buying new and converting, it looks like we have an opportunity if it can all work out. And so that's one piece of it. You know what? I want to move us to see where we go into the audience questions in a second. Before we do that, I couldn't help but share my excitement about one of the ideas with autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles that you touched on, Adrian, that I get very excited about, is that we're about to open up the box of possibilities with what we can do with electric-powered motor vehicles that can move through space and can move things throughout space and not be aware enough so that it's not crashing into other objects. I look forward to the day where I can walk to the grocery store, select all my groceries, put them in my own bags that I'm very happy to have brought to the store, and load them in a cart that follows me home and that goes back to the store all on its own. I think those are the kind of things that, when I think of autonomous vehicles and electric vehicle solutions and smart AI technology, I feel like it's going to redefine what we conceive of as a quote-unquote car. I just think these are now spaces or objects that can move through space, and whether you're in it or it's objects is a whole nother kind of suite. So I'm really excited about where the future moves us to mobility. I believe any way we look, we're moving towards a multimodal future where we're going to have a platform for electricity and for monetary transactions that kind of cross all of these things. And that's going to touch some infrastructure. So now I'm going to move us to a little bit of our questions from the audience. And YouTube's been pretty quiet, so I'm grabbing the ones that are coming in through the chat. The first question here.
Building the light rail line connecting downtown Portland to down past the PCC Sylvania campus and on down to Tigard. And there's two components of that project that we're actually looking at some of these emerging technologies very seriously. And one of them is when we first leave downtown Portland, there's a transit way, much like the Tillicum Crossing, where bus and rail is sharing the same right-of-way to cross the river there. There's a shared transit way that we're working on in this design along Barber Boulevard. We're looking at how connected and autonomous types of technologies could help move people much more quickly through a shared transit way along that section of Barber. And then when you get down to 53rd Street, there's a new station that is being designed there. And we're looking at an actual autonomous shuttle, much like what we've been talking about here, the 10 to 12 to 15 person electric autonomous shuttle, connecting the light rail system up to PCC's campus. These are still very much in the preliminary design phase at this point, but by the time we will be going live with that next extension of light rail, they're very real technologies that wouldn't just be in the pilot phase, but in the implementation phase.
Interesting.
We're also working on the bus rapid transit corridor. This is a really cool concept of increasing bus speed and reliability with lower floor, little fancier buses that are much more like bringing light rail to the rubber tire world. And the division corridor, again, connecting more in the Ozzie area all the way out to East Portland and into Gresham. And we're very actively involved in the design and modeling and next generation transit signal priority, where the buses will be talking to the traffic signal system. And when they're running behind schedule, actually being able to request that the traffic network extend their green time and get them through that intersection so that we can move people more reliably. We actually have a system like that in Portland right now already, but we're looking at sort of bringing that up into the next generation technology. So there's a couple of examples.
Thank you. Speaking of next generations, I got a question that came in that I'd love to hear both your perspectives on, and it's about the next generation of workforce. The transportation industry has some of the same issues the other construction trades have, but I think they're magnified because transportation is that much more specialized. We have major transportation infrastructure packages coming onto our market here in the near future, and the demand for workforce and for technicians, for people that understand the EV technology, the how to install them, how to maintain them. I think that's where the question's coming from, but it's simply, what are your thoughts for how we establish a good pipeline for workforce? And Gary, I'd like to start with you. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because people have kind of gotten away from the path of doing what you love and finding that through trade schools and things, and kind of people get funneled towards the traditional higher education college path. And I think there needs to be a way to connect people with more of the hands-on stuff. Some of the school programs have dropped that, as I know there's another nonprofit I won't mention by name that's picked up the dearth of auto shop. And so they have students where they get college and high school credit for coming. And so it's a central draw and draws around from multiple schools and school districts, and those kids enroll and they get to learn auto shop. And, the way that we remember from our days growing up. And and they're trying to move that forward and bring in the electric vehicle portion of that too, because it's a little bit different world. All new cars are mostly computers, but you don't have the pistons and the traditional engine parts that people think of with automobiles with EVs.
I still remember the gaskets I'd get tangled up in. Adrian, what are your thoughts?
So, well, Gary was kind of hitting on one of the key ones right there at the end. That's we're moving from a sort of heavily mechanical world, and this is both for the people that are maintaining the vehicles and the people that are maintaining the traffic signals. It's really kind of up and down the ranks where the jobs are going to be changing, and they are going to be more electrical, and they are going to be more computer science type based. And so there's a lot of concern, and to a degree rightly so, with as we talk about automation, and we talk about automation of the vehicle fleets, that in the very long run, this will start to displace jobs of truck drivers and bus drivers, and it's a real concern. It's one that we can get out ahead of, because it's not a problem we're going to be dealing with next year or even in just the next few years. But we do need to now start thinking about retraining our workforce and really be looking at these more high-tech jobs that are going to be created, and really start reinvesting and continuing our investment in our STEM programs so that our younger people are more comfortable with computer programming and getting ready for the jobs of the future, because they are going to be there. Mm-hmm. But we do need to really take a look at what that future looks like for them.
All right, final question, and this one goes, I'll throw it out to each of you. Now, you both know I'm running for mayor in the city of Portland, and part of my motivation has been because I feel like our leadership needs to be doing a better job of partnering with our industry groups to really set ourselves up for success in the future. So whether it's me or whoever, you're talking to the mayor of Portland, and you have a chance to say, here's what I think you should be doing in order to address any of the issues that we talked about today: workforce development, new technology, new codes, new infrastructure. If you were to say, hey, this is one thing the mayor or the city can do that's going to really help move this forward, move the needle, what would you say those things are? And let's see here. I'm going to start with you, Gary.
I kind of touched on it before. I think that the biggest thing that can move the needle almost immediately is changing some of the building codes, electrical codes, when people are doing new construction, building a new business, remodeling a house, is making provisions that they're going to be able to charge their vehicle, and also give some incentive to workplaces to allow charging at work for those that won't have the opportunity at home. And I think the city will reap great benefits from just having EVs driving around versus internal combustion vehicles.
Thank you, Adrian. What do you think?
For me, the answer is probably a bit broader, a little bit more high level. I think the biggest area that the city could make a pivot that would have very distinct change and opportunity here is around the procurement methods of working together with the private sector. These emerging technologies that we've been talking about here are happening very, very quickly within the industry. And our traditional government procurement models are very slow, very highly prescriptive, and it has a tendency to have to write a whole bunch of very detailed functional and technical requirements. And by the time you get through the procurement process for something that you were trying to buy, it's several years down the road in a lot of cases. And I think we need to be more agile and look at more pilot projects and demonstrations, really try to identify as a city what the outcomes are that we're trying to achieve, and then let the vendor and technology community come to us with how they would achieve those benefits. And start small, do pilots. Don't be afraid that some of the pilots are not going to work out. A failed pilot is not a failed program, that you learn a lot from a pilot to then go into a demonstration that's more successful, and then be ready to more broadly implement some of these new technologies. But I think we really need to rethink procurement and become more agile.
Now, as a designer, I'm used to thinking this way. As a mayor, I don't know that I'm going to approach it in the same attitude, but I've often said in the design world, let's see how fast and how hard we can fail so that we can get it right tomorrow. And it was just a matter of trying to find all the opportunities to fail first. Works nice in the design world. I wouldn't want to tinker with the city in that way, but I think that being unafraid to try things and leveraging the pilots of other cities, the policies where other places have tried something, are those opportunities. Gentlemen, I'm really grateful that you guys have been willing to take a time out of your evening to join me tonight to speak a little bit about the world that you exist in and a little bit about how it might start informing what the city needs to think about. These are important conversations to have, and I believe that having the conversations that take us towards what is the long-term vision is the kind of thing that is going to position Portland to get ahead of all of these changes that are taking place. I would encourage you to reach out to me if you have any ideas on specific cities or policies that you think I could look at. I'm always looking to sharpen my pencil. And frankly, when it comes to the procurement methods, Adrian, if you're familiar of any good performance metrics that could be applied to non-highway compatible vehicles, that's been the holy grail that I'm looking for now, to really start looking at an example to start poking holes at for whether it's good for the city of Portland.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see here. Gary, Adrian, is there anything else you'd like to say to our viewers? Keep in mind, this will be posted later, so if anyone didn't watch it tonight, you could still send it to your friend that's going to watch it any time in the future. It'll live in the cloud. So anything you want to say to someone now or in the future? Sorry, I'll start. Let's go with Adrian, and then we'll go to you, Gary, so we'll finish it up.
Yeah, well, the last comment I want to make, Ozzie, is something that you and I have talked about, but that we didn't really touch on today, and that's the importance of not just what new technologies are coming, but where they're coming and how they're implemented across our city, and really making sure, and this is where the mayor and the policy that we set locally here can be really influential, is to make sure that that technology and transportation doesn't become the next sort of digital divide issue with the haves and the have-nots within our city. And as I mentioned, this is something that you and I have talked about before, and I know is baked into the policies that you're thinking about. But really making sure that our underrepresented communities that we haven't always historically invested in transportation, that we focus on bringing all these new technologies there. So,
loving you to hear you say that. Gary, parting words to our viewers now and in the future.
Well, I just first wanted to thank you for inviting me to participate in this. Is certainly, as I appreciate the reach out, and we would look forward to working with you in the future in whatever capacity to exchange information.
I like that.
And I just want to encourage people that they can start making a difference today. The city can make a policy that makes it easier and help them overcome some barriers, but there's no reason not to explore, the world of EVs and how it might fit for you today. We've seen direct results with people not commuting, and would like to see that same going forward.
Well, thank you both guys for joining me this evening. I really appreciate you taking the time. I admire your dedication to this work, and I am hopeful that in the next few years, we're going to see some major differences in how we're approaching the opportunity factor of what this change represents for our region. And with that, thanks guys, you can hang out. I'm going to send it on over back to the audience, because we have, as the Car Talk guys say, I'm a big fan of them, you have now thoroughly squandered an hour of your life here listening to us tonight, but I really appreciate you taking the time. And with that, we're going to wrap up tonight's show. It's the second episode of our 3-part series. You're welcome to go watch episode 1 and see all of the things we learned to fix for the second one. I'd like to thank Paul Tice and Topa 3D for their sponsorship, and everyone that has worked on this project to put the production together. My special guests, Adrian and Gary, thank you so much, and I especially want to thank everyone out there for tuning in. I invite you to join me again this Friday, May 8th at 7 p.m. for the final episode of this series, where I'm going to be sharing my plans for a prosperous and sustainable economy for Portland. You heard us talk tonight about the opportunities on the horizon. I think we could address our carbon footprint and improve the economic resilience of our region all in one move. So tune in on Friday. My guest will be Vanessa Kaichis, owner and founder of Columbia Green, a local green roof company, and Eric Corey Freed, a local architect and a sustainable design thought leader. Again, that's this Friday, May 8th at 7 p.m. live on Facebook and YouTube. Now, in the meanwhile, I invite you to help me make Portland history by voting for me. I know we have our ballots sitting on our dining room tables as we speak. So please take a look at my website and get to know not only my ideas, but who I am as a person. With ballots already on the move, your votes, your public support, and your donations are more important than ever. You can help me by telling 27 of your friends about my campaign and making a donation to Ozzie for pdx.org today. We are down to the wire, and your help could make all the difference in the world. If you'd like more information about my policies or would like to see more of my videos, visit my website and subscribe to my social media channels. Thank you very much to everyone out there for watching, and have a wonderful night. Adios.